welcome back to the Bible in 90 Days. We're on day 62. Tomorrow I will be going on a road trip, so this may be the last video upload that I do for like this. Now I will still be doing a YouTube video, but it will be just audio. It'll be a pretty picture or something. And you can just listen to me and read along in your Bible with me if you want, or however you've been doing that. But I don't anticipate being able to do video. Now I will try and record them and try and do that, but the way I've got this set up, I can only keep so much video in my devices, and each of these videos is like 2 gigabytes. So I have all of this video that we've done. Man, we've got hundreds of hours of video now, or about 100 hours of video, and man, it's just been it's been a learning curve trying to figure out how to do all of this and how to keep it. And while it's all on YouTube, I kind of wanted to keep some of it as my own intellectual property. So so I have all of this video, and I'm trying to figure out how to keep it, and I've got it on an SSD drive. And I continually have to move my audio and move my video together and put them in a thing. And it's really complicated, and I don't know how I'm going to do that for 7 or 8 days just with my devices. But I will do my best and try and get those. What I might do is get them all like ready, and then have, so I can have complete videos. I don't know what. I'm just going to do the best I can, really, for the next for this next week. And it looks like about 7 or 8 days that I'll be gone. I'm driving all the way out to Colorado to take Mom to a new place to live, and that's going to be awesome. It's a huge blessing. It's something that we've been praying to get together about for a long time. But it's just time to do it, you know. There's times to do things, and if you don't take the time, well, the time makes itself. So, and that's kind of where we are with that. Anyhow, Ezekiel, I think we're past the crude parts of Ezekiel, and if you've been listening and reading along, you know what I'm talking about. And not to say that it's a bad thing, but it was, so far to me, that's the clearest example of why God was so angry at Israel that he had to destroy it. Ezekiel gives us that truth clear as a bell. I mean, you can understand God's anger in reading Ezekiel. And I think that that's also some of the reason that God lets us go through pain in our lives, because the pain that we go through doesn't compare to the pain that God goes through, and let alone sacrificing his son for us. And all we have to do is look to him and believe in him and trust in him for that, and we can't even do that. The Bible is a human drama. It's a drama of epic proportions. Today's reading, he continues to lament over Pharaoh and goes over these things. His call is renewed in the next chapters, and then we get a picture of the resurrection and some odd prophecies. And later in the reading today, we will see a vision of the new temple. This isn't the second temple, which might have been what people thought that it would be, might have been what they built it to look like. But as we read through this, you'll notice that this isn't a physical temple that is built. Now God sends him here in a vision and has him measure it, and this is a much bigger temple than we could ever imagine. This is the new heaven and the new earth, is what he's describing, and the new resurrection, and some of the visions that he is given are too extravagant for us to even imagine. So as we read today, just try and picture the things that we're describing from the Bible, and just try and make it real in your mind. The Bible's so incredible. Well, let's jump into the Word today. I guess I can't say let's jump into the Word after I introduce things to you and give you an opening for 5 minutes. I know that your time is precious, and I hope that you enjoy my rambling. But that's not what we're here for. We're here to read the Word of God. So let's jump into Ezekiel chapter 32. In the 12th year, in the 12th month, on the first day, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, take up a lament concerning the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and say to him, You are like a lion among the nations. You are like a monster on the seas, thrashing about in your streams, churning the water with your feet, and muddying the streams. This is what the sovereign Lord says. With a great throng of people I will cast my net over you, and they will haul you up in my net. I will throw you on the land and hurl you on the open field. I will let all the birds of the sky settle on you, and all the animals of the wild gorge themselves on you. I will spread your flesh on the mountains, and fill the valleys with your remains. I will drench the land with your flowing blood, all the way to the mountains, and the ravines will be filled with your flesh. When I snuff you out, I will cover the heavens, and darken their skies. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon will not give its light. All the shining lights in the heavens I will darken over you. I will bring darkness over your land, declares the sovereign Lord. I will trouble the hearts of many peoples when I bring about your destruction among the nations. Among lands you have not known, I will cause many peoples to be appalled at you, and their kings will shudder with horror because of you. When I brandish my sword before them, on the day of your downfall, each of them will tremble, every moment for its life. For his life. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. The sword of the king of Babylon will come against you. I will cause your hordes to fall by the swords of mighty men, the most ruthless of all nations. They will shatter the pride of Egypt, and all her hordes will be overthrown. I will destroy all her cattle from beside abundant waters, no longer to be stirred by the foot of man or muddied by the hooves of cattle. Then I will let her waters settle, and I will make her streams flow like oil, declares the sovereign Lord. When I make Egypt desolate, and strip the land of everything in it, when I strike down all who live there, then you will know that I am the Lord. This is the lament. 16. This is the lament they will chant for her. The daughters of the nations will chant it. For Egypt and all her hordes they will chant it, declares the sovereign Lord. 17. In the 12th year, on the 15th day of the month, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, wail for the hordes of Egypt, and consign to the earth below both her and the daughters of mighty nations, along with those who go down to the pit. Say to them, Are you more favorable than others? Go down and be laid among the uncircumcised. They will fall among those by the sword. The sword is drawn. Let her be dragged off with all her hordes from the realm of the dead, and the mighty leaders will say of Egypt and her allies, They have come down, and they lie down with the uncircumcised, with those killed by the sword. 22. Assyria is there with her whole army. She is surrounded by the graves of all her slain, and all who have fallen by the sword. The graves are the depths of the pit, and her army lies around her grave. All who had spread in terror in the land of the living are slain, fallen by the sword. Elam is there, with all her hordes around her grave. All of them are slain, fallen by the sword. All who had spread terror in the land of the living went down, uncircumcised to the earth below. They bear their shame, and those who go down to the pit. A bed is made for her among the slain, with all her hordes around her grave. All of them are uncircumcised, killed by the sword because their terror had spread in the land of the living. They bear their shame. With those who go down to the pit, they are laid among the slain. Meshach and Tubal are there, with all their hordes around their graves. All of them are uncircumcised, killed by the sword because they spread their terror in the land of the living. But they do not lie with the fallen warriors of old, who went down to the realm of the dead with their weapons of war, their swords placed under their heads and their shields resting on their bones. Though these warriors also had terrorized the land of the living, you too, Pharaoh, will be broken and will lie among the uncircumcised, with those killed by the sword. Edom is there, her kings and all her princes. Despite their power, they are laid with those killed by the sword. They lie with the uncircumcised, with those who go down to the pit. All the princes of the north and the Sidonians are there. They went down with the slain in disgrace despite the terror caused by their power. They lie uncircumcised with those killed by the sword, and bear their shame with those who go down to the pit. 31. Pharaoh, he and all his army will see them, and he will be consoled for all his hordes that were killed by the sword, declares the sovereign Lord. Although I had him spread terror in the land of the living, Pharaoh and all his hordes will be laid among the uncircumcised, with those killed by the sword, declares the sovereign Lord. Chapter 33. I think that's what we understand as hell, the pit. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, speak to your people and say to them, when I bring the sword against a land, and the people of the land choose one of their men and make him their watchman, and he sees the sword coming against the land and blows the trumpet to warn the people, then if anyone hears the trumpet but does not heed the warning, and the sword comes and takes their life, their blood will be on their own head. Since they heard the sound of the trumpet, did not heed the warning, their blood will be on their own head. But if they had heeded the warning, they would have saved themselves. But if the watchman sees the sword coming and does not blow the trumpet to warn the people, and the sword comes and takes someone's life, that person's life will be taken because of their sin. But I will hold the watchmen accountable for their blood. Verse 7. Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the people of Israel. So hear the word I speak, and give them warning from me. Say to the wicked, you wicked person, you will surely die, and do not speak out to dissuade them from their ways. That wicked person will die for their sin, and I will hold you accountable for their blood. But if you warn that wicked person to turn from their ways, and they do not do it, they will die for their sin, though you yourself will be saved. Verse 10. Son of man, say to the Israelites, this is what you are saying. Your offenses and sins weigh us down, and we are wasting away because of them. How then can we live? Say to them, as surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, I take no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but rather that they turn from their ways and live. Turn from your evil ways. Why will you die, people of Israel? Verse 12. Therefore, Son of man, say to your people, if someone who is righteous disobeys, that person's former righteousness will count for nothing. And if someone who is wicked repents, that person's former wickedness will not bring condemnation. The righteous person who sins will not be allowed to live, even though they were formerly righteous. If I tell a righteous person that they will surely die or surely live, but then they trust their righteousness and do evil, none of the righteous things that person has done will be remembered. They will die for the evil they have done. And if I say to a wicked person, you will surely die, but they turn from their sin and do what is just and right, if they give back what they took and pledge for a loan, return what they have stolen, follow the decrees that give life, and do no evil, that person will surely live. They will not die. None of the sins that person has committed will be remembered against them. They have done what is just and right, and they will surely live. Say to your people, the way of the Lord is not just, but it is their way that it is. Yet your people say, the way of the Lord is not just, but their way. But it is their way that is not just. If a righteous person turns from their righteousness and does evil, they will die for it. And if a wicked person turns from their wickedness and does what is just and right, they will live by doing so. Yet you Israelites say, the way of the Lord is not just, but I will judge each of you according to your own ways. Verse 21. In the 12th year of our exile, in the 10th month, on the 5th day, a man who had escaped from Jerusalem came to me and said, the city has fallen. That's what they were waiting for, back in chapter 32, I think, or 31. Now the evening before the man arrived, the hand of the Lord was on me, and he had opened my mouth before the man came to me in the morning. So my mouth was opened, and I was no longer silent. Remember, he had to keep his mouth shut from the time that his wife died until this man came. So then the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, the people are living in the ruins in the land of Israel, saying, Abraham was only one man, yet he possessed the land, but we are many. Surely the land has been given to us as our possession. Therefore say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Since you eat meat with the blood still in it, and look to your idols, and shed blood, should you then possess the land? You rely on your sword. You do detestable things. Each one of you defiles his neighbor's wife. Should you then possess the land? 27. Say this to them. This is what the sovereign Lord says. As surely as I live, those who are left in the ruins will fall by the sword. Those out in the country I will give to the wild animals and to be devoured. And those in the strongholds and caves will die of a plague. I will make the land as a desolate waste, and her proud strength will come to an end, and the mountains of Israel will become desolate, so that no one will cross them. Then they will know that I am the Lord, when I have made the land a desolate waste, because of all of the detestable things they have done. 30. As for you, Son of man, your people are walking together about you by the walls and the doors of the house, saying to each other, Come and hear a message that has come from the Lord. My people come to you, as they usually do, and sit before you to hear your words. But they do not put them into practice. Their mouths speak of love, but their hearts are greedy for unjust gain. Indeed, to them you are nothing more than one who sings love songs with a beautiful voice and plays an instrument well, for they hear your words but do not put them into practice. When all this comes true, and it surely will, then you will know that a prophet has been among them. Chapter 34. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. This chapter is part of my call into the ministry. I read this chapter and it so convicted me. Prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, This is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to you shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat the curds, clothe yourselves with the wool, and slaughter the choice animals. But you do not take care of the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, or healed the sick, or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays, or searched for the lost. You have ruled them harshly and brutally. So they were scattered because there was no shepherd. And when they were scattered, they became food for all the wild animals. My sheep wandered over all the mountains, and on every high hill. They were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched or looked for them. Verse 7. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, because my flock lacks a shepherd, and has been plundered, and has become food for the wild animals, and because my shepherds did not search for my flock, but cared for themselves rather than for my flock, therefore you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against the shepherds, and will hold them accountable for my flock. I will remove them from tending the flock, so that the shepherds can no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths, and it will no longer be food for them. Verse 11. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. I myself will search for my sheep and look after them, as a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them. So I will look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on a day of clouds and darkness. I will bring them out from the nations and gather them from the countries, and will bring them to their own land. I will pasture them on the mountains of Israel, in the ravines, and in all the settlements in the land. I will tend them in a good pasture, and the mountain heights of Israel will be their grazing land. They will lie down in good grazing land, and there they will feed in a rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I myself will tend my sheep, and have them lie down, declares the sovereign Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak, but the sleek and the strong I will destroy, the shepherd of the flock. I will shepherd the flock with justice. Verse 17. As for you, my flock, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will judge between one sheep and another, and between rams and goats. It is not enough for you to feed on the good pasture. Is it not enough for you to feed on the good pasture? You must also trample the rest of your pasture with your feet. Is it not enough for you to drink clear water? Must you also muddy the rest with your feet? Must my flock feed on what you have trampled, and drink whatever you have muddied with your feet? Therefore this is what the sovereign Lord says to them. See, I myself will judge between the fat sheep and the lean sheep, because you shove with a flank and shoulder, butting all the weak sheep with your horns until you have driven them away. I will save my flock, and they will no longer be plundered. I will judge between one sheep and another. I will place over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he will tend them. He will tend them and be their shepherd. I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince among them. I, the Lord, have spoken. I will make a covenant of peace with them, and rid the land of savage beasts, so that they may live in the wilderness and sleep in the forests in safety. I will make them and the places surrounding my hill a blessing. I will send down showers in season. There will be showers of blessing. The trees will yield their fruit, and the ground will yield its crops, and the people will be secure in the land. They will know that I am the Lord, when I break the bars of their yoke and rescue them from the hands of those who enslaved them. They will no longer be plundered by the nations, nor will wild animals devour them. They will live in safety, and no one will make them afraid. I will provide for them a land renowned for its crops, and they will no longer be victims of famine in the land or bear the scorn of the nations. They will know that I, the Lord their God, am with them, and that the Israelites are my people, declares the sovereign Lord. You are my sheep, the sheep of my pasture, and I am your God, declares the sovereign Lord. Chapter 35. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, set your face against Mount Seir. Prophesy against it and say, This is what the sovereign Lord says, I am against you, Mount Seir. I will stretch out my hand against you and make you a desolate waste. I will turn your towns into ruins, and you will be desolate. Then you will know that I am the Lord. Verse 5. Because you harbored an ancient hostility and devoured the Israelites over to the sword at the time of their calamity. The time of their punishment has reached its climax. Therefore, as surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, I will give you over to bloodshed, and it will pursue you. Since you did not hate bloodshed, bloodshed will pursue you. I will make Mount Seir a desolate waste, and cut it off from all who come and go. I will fill your mountains with the slain. Those killed by the sword will fall on your hills and your valleys, and in your valleys, and in all your ravines. I will make you desolate forever. Your towns will not be inhabited. Then you will know that I am the Lord. Verse 10. Because you have said, These two nations and countries will be ours, and we will take possession of them, even though I, the Lord, was there. Surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, I will treat you in accordance with your anger and jealousy you showed in your hatred of them, and I will make myself known among them when I judge you. Then you will know that I am the Lord, that I, the Lord, have heard all the contemptible things you have said against the mountains of Israel. You said they have been laid waste and have been given over to us to devour. You boasted against me and spoke against me without restraint. I heard it. This is what the sovereign Lord says. While the whole earth rejoices, I will make you desolate, because you rejoiced when the inheritance of Israel became desolate. That is how I will treat you. You will be desolate, Mount Seir, you and all Edom. Then you will know that I am the Lord. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Chapter 36. Son of man, prophesy to the mountains of Israel and say, Mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. The enemy said of you, Aha! The ancient heights have become our possession. Therefore prophesy and say, This is what the sovereign Lord says. Because they ravaged and crushed you from every side, so that you became the possession of the rest of the nations, and the object of people's malicious talk and slander. Therefore, mountains of Israel, hear the word of the sovereign Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to the mountains and hills, to the ravines and valleys, to the desolate ruins and the deserted towns that have been plundered and ridiculed by the rest of the nations around you. This is what the sovereign Lord says. In my burning zeal I have spoken against the rest of the nations, against all Edom for the glee and malice in their hearts that made their land they made my land their own possession, so that they might plunder its pasture land. Therefore prophesy concerning the land of Israel, and say to the mountains and hills, to the ravines and valleys, This is what the sovereign Lord says. I speak in my jealous wrath because you have suffered the scorn of the nations. Therefore this is what the sovereign Lord says. I swear with uplifted hand that the nations around you will also suffer scorn. But you, mountains of Israel, will produce branches and fruit for my people Israel, for they soon will come home. I am concerned for you and will look on you with favor. You will be plowed and sown, and I will cause many people to live on you. Yes, all Israel. The towns will be inhabited and the ruins rebuilt. I will increase the number of people and animals living on you. They will be fruitful and become numerous. I will settle the people. I will settle people on you as in the past, and will make you prosper more than before. Then you will know that I am the Lord. I will cause people, my people Israel, to live on you. They will possess you, and you will be their inheritance, and you will never again deprive them of their children. Verse 13. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Because some say to you, you devour people and deprive your nation of its children, therefore you will no longer devour people or make your nation childless, declares the sovereign Lord. No longer will I make you hear the taunts of the nations, and no longer will you suffer the scorn of the peoples, or cause your nation to fall, declares the sovereign Lord. Verse 16. Again the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, when the rest of the people Israel were living in their own land, they defiled it by their conduct and their actions. Their conduct was like a woman's monthly uncleanness in my sight. So I poured out my wrath on them because they had shed blood in the land, and because they had defiled it with their idols. I dispersed them among the nations, and they were scattered through the countries. I judged them according to their conduct and their actions. And wherever they went through the among the nations, they profaned my holy name. For it was said of them, These are the Lord's people, and they had to leave his land. I had concern for my holy name, which the people of Israel profaned among the nations where they had gone. Verse 22. Therefore say to the Israelites, this is what the sovereign Lord says. It is not for your sake, people of Israel, that I am going to do these things, but for the sake of my holy name, which you have profaned among the nations where you have gone. I will show the holiness of my great name, which has been profaned among the nations, the name you have profaned among them. Then the nations will know that I am the Lord, declares the sovereign Lord, when I am proved holy through you before their eyes. Verse 24. For I will take you out of the nations. I will gather you from all the countries and bring you back into your own land. I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your impurities and from all your idols. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove you from your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. Then you will live in the land I gave your ancestors. You will be my people, and I will be your God. I will save you from all your uncleanness. I will call for the grain and make it plentiful, and will not bring famine upon you. I will increase the fruit of the trees and the crops of the field, so that you no longer suffer disgrace among the nations because of famine. Then you will remember your evil ways and wicked deeds, and you will loathe yourself for your sins and detestable practices. I want you to know that I am doing this for your sake, that I am not doing this for your sake, declares the sovereign Lord. Be ashamed and disgraced for your conduct, people of Israel. Verse 33. This is what the sovereign Lord says. On the day I cleanse you from all your sins, I will resettle your towns, and the ruins will be rebuilt, and the desolate land will be cultivated instead of lying desolate in the sight of all who pass through it. They will say, This land that has been laid waste has become like a garden of Eden, like the Garden of Eden. The cities that were lying in ruins, desolate and destroyed, are now fortified and inhabited. Then the nations around you will remain will know that I, the Lord, have rebuilt what was destroyed, and I have replanted what was desolate. I, the Lord, have spoken, and I will do it. 37. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Once again, I will yield to Israel's plea, and do this for them. I will make their people as numerous as sheep, as numerous as the flocks for offerings at Jerusalem during their appointed festivals. So will the ruined cities be fulfilled will be filled with flocks of people. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Chapter 37. This one's pretty famous. The hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord, and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. Then he said to me, Prophesy to these bones, and say to them, Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. And I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. Verse 7, So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I was prophesying there was a noise, a rattling sound, and these bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, Prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of man, and say to it, This is what the Sovereign Lord says. Come, breath, from the four winds, and breathe into these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as the Lord commanded me, or as he commanded me. And breath entered them, and they came to life, and stood up on their feet, a vast army. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say our bones are dried up, and our hope is gone, we are cut off. Therefore prophesy and say to them, This is what the Sovereign Lord says. My people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord, when I open your graves and bring you up from them. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken and have done it, declares the Lord. Verse 15. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, take a stick of wood and write on it, belonging to Judah and the Israelite associated with him. Then take another stick of write and write on it, belonging to Joseph, that is to Ephraim, and all the Israelites associated with him. Join them together into one stick, that they will become one in your hand. Verse 18. When your people ask you, this is another sign act, by the way. When your people ask you, won't you tell us what you mean by this? Say to them, This is what the Sovereign Lord says. I'm going to take the stick of Joseph, which is Ephraim's hand, and the Israelite tribes associated with him, and join it into Judah's stick. I will make them into a single stick of wood, and they will become one in my hand. Before their eyes the sticks you have written on, and say to them, Hold before their eyes the sticks you have written on, and say to them, This is what the Sovereign Lord says. I will take the Israelites out of the nations where they have gone. I will gather them from all around and bring them back to their own land. I will make them one nation in the land and on the mountains of Israel. There will be one king over all of them, and they will never again be two nations or be divided into two kingdoms. They will no longer defile themselves with their idols and vile images, or that of any other offense, for I will save them from all their sinful backsliding, and I will cleanse them. They will be my people, and I will be their God. Verse 24. My servant David will be king over them, and they will all live, and they will all have one shepherd, and they will follow my laws and be careful to keep my decrees. They will live in the land I gave to my servant Jacob, the land where your ancestors lived. They and their children and their children's children will live there forever. And David my servant will be their prince forever. I will make a covenant of peace with them, and it will be an everlasting covenant. I will establish them and increase their numbers, and I will put my sanctuary among them forever. My dwelling place will be with them. I will be their God, and they will be my people. Then the nations will know that I, the Lord, make Israel holy, when my sanctuary is among them forever. Chapter 38. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, set your face against Gog, of the land of Magog, the chief priest of Meshech and Tubal. Prophesy against him, and say, This is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, Gog, chief priest of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around and put hooks in your jaws and bring you out with your whole army, your horses, your horsemen fully armed, and a great horde with large and small shields, of all of them brandishing their swords. Persia, Cush, and Put will be with them, with all the shields and helmets, also Gomer, with all its troops, and Beth Togarmah from the far north, with all its troops, the many nations with you. Verse 7, Get ready, be prepared, you and all the hordes gathered about you, to take command of them. After many days you will be called to arms. In the future years you will invade a land that is recovered from war. Those people were gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate. They had been brought out from the nations, and now all of them live in safety. You and all your troops, and the many nations with you will go up, advancing like a storm. You will be like a cloud covering the land. This is what the sovereign Lord says. On that day thoughts will come into your mind, and you will devise an evil scheme. You will say, I will invade a land of unwalled villages. I will attack a peaceful and unsuspecting people, all of them living without walls and without gates and bars. I will plunder and loot and turn my hand against the resettled ruins and the people gathered from the nations, rich in livestock and goods, living at the center of the land. Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish and all her villagers will say to you, Have you come to plunder? Have you gathered your hoards to loot, to carry off silver and gold, to take away livestock and good, and to seize much plunder? Verse 14. Therefore, Son of man, prophesy and say to Gog, This is what the sovereign Lord says. In that day when my people Israel are living in safety, will you not take notice of it? Will you come from your place in the far north, and many nations with you, all of them riding on horses, a great horde, a mighty army? You will advance against my people Israel like a cloud that covers the land in the days to come. Gog, I will bring against you bring you against my land, so that the nations may know me when I am proved holy through you before their eyes. 17. This is what the sovereign Lord says. You are the one I spoke of in former days by my servants, the prophets of Israel. At that time they prophesied for years that I would bring you against them. This is what will happen in that day. When Gog attacks the land of Israel, my hot anger will be roused, declares the sovereign Lord. In my zeal and fiery wrath I declare that at that time there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. The fish in the sea, and the birds in the sky, and the beasts of the field, every creature that moves along the ground, and all the people on the face of the earth will tremble at my presence. The mountains will become overturned, and the cliffs will crumble, and every wall will fall to the ground. I will summon a sword against Gog on all my mountains, declares the sovereign Lord. Every man's sword will be against his brother. I will execute judgment on him with plague and bloodshed. I will pour down torrents of rain, hailstones, and burning sulfur on him, and on his troops, and on the many nations with him. And And so I will show my greatness and my holiness, and I will make myself known in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Chapter 39. Son of man, prophesy against Gog, and say, This is what the sovereign Lord says, I am against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around and drag you along. I will bring you from the far north and send you against the mountains of Israel. Then I will strike your bow from your left hand, and make your arrows drop from your right hand. On the mountains of Israel you will fall, and you and all your troops and the nations with you. I will give you food. I will give you as food to all kinds of carrion, birds, and to the wild animals. You will fall in the open field, for I have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. I will send fire on Magog, and all those who live in the safety in safety in the coastlands, and they will know that I am the Lord. Verse 7. I will make known my holy name among my people Israel. I will no longer let my holy name be profaned. And the nations will know that I am the Lord, the Holy One in Israel. It is coming. It will surely take place, declares the sovereign Lord. This is the day I have spoken of. Verse 9. Then those who live in the towns of Israel will go out and use the weapons for fuel and burn them up. The small and the large shields, the bows and arrows, the war clubs and spears. For 7 years they will use them for fuel. They will not need to gather wood from the fields or cut from the forest, because they will use the weapons for fuel. They will plunder those who plundered them, and loot those who looted them, declares the sovereign Lord. Verse 11. On that day I will give Gog a burial place in Israel, in the valley of those who travel east from the sea. I will block the way of travelers, because Gog and all his hordes will be buried there. So it will be called the Valley of Hamon, Gog. Verse 12. For 7 months the Israelites will be burying them in order to cleanse the land. All the people of the land will bury them, and the day I display my glory will be a memorable day for them, declares the sovereign Lord. People will be continually employed in cleansing the land. They will spread out across the land, and along with others, they will bury any bodies that are lying on the ground. After 7 months, they will carry out a more detailed search. As they go through the land, anyone who sees a human bone will leave a marker beside it until the grave diggers bury it in the valley of Hamon Gog, near a town called Hamonah. And so they will cleanse the land. Verse 17. Son of man, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Call out to every kind of bird and all the wild animals. Assemble and come together from all around to sacrifice, and to the sacrifice I am preparing for you, the great sacrifice on the mountains of Israel. Therefore you will eat flesh and drink blood. You will eat the flesh of the mighty men. You will eat the flesh of mighty men and drink the blood of the princes of the earth, as they were rams and lambs and goats and bulls, and all of them, fattened animals from Bashan. At the sacrifice I am preparing for you, you will eat fat until you are gluttoned, and drink blood until you are drunk. At my table you will eat your fill of horses and riders, mighty men and soldiers of every kind, declares the sovereign Lord. 21. I will display my glory among the nations, and all the nations will see the punishment I inflict on and the hand I lay on them. From that day forward, people of Israel will know that I am the Lord their God, and the nations will know that the people of Israel went into exile for their sin, because they were unfaithful to me. So I hid my face from them and handed them over to their enemies, and they all fell by the sword. I dealt with them according to their uncleanness and their offenses, and I hid my face from them. Verse 25. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will now restore the fortunes of Jacob, and I will have compassion on all the people of Israel, and I will be zealous for my holy name. They will forget their shame, and all the unfaithfulness they showed toward me in the day that when they lived in safety in the land with no one to make them afraid. Then, or when I have brought them back from the nations and have gathered them from the countries of their enemies, I will be proved holy through them in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord their God. For though I sent them into exile among the nations, I will gather them to their own land, not leaving any behind. I will no longer hide my face from them, for I will pour out my spirit on the people of Israel, declares the sovereign Lord. Chapter 40. In the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after the fall of the city, on that day, the very day of the land on that very day the hand of the Lord was on me, and he took me there. In visions of God, he took me to the land of Israel and set me on a very high mountain, on whose south side were some buildings that looked like a city. He took me there, and I saw a man whose appearance was like bronze. He was standing in the gateway with a linen cord and a measuring rod in his hand. The man said to me, Son of man, look carefully and listen closely and pay attention to everything I am going to show you. For this is why you have been brought here. Tell the people of Israel everything you see. Verse 5. I saw a wall completely surrounding the temple area. The length of the measuring rod in the man's hand was 6 long cubits, each of which was a cubit and a handbreadth. He measured the wall, and it was 1 measuring rod thick, and 1 rod high. Then he went to the east gate and climbed its steps and measured the threshold of the gate. It was 1 rod deep. The alcoves for the guards were 1 rod long and 1 rod wide, and the projecting walls was between the alcoves. There were 5 cubits high, and the threshold of the gate next to the portico facing the temple was 1 rod deep. Then he measured the portico of the gateway. It was 8 cubits deep. Its jambs were 2 cubits thick. The portico of the gateway faced the temple. Inside the east gate there were 3 alcoves on each side. The 3 had the same measurements, and the faces of the projecting walls on each side had the same measurements. Then he had measured the width of the entrance of the gateway. It was 10 cubits, and its length was 13 cubits. In front of each alcove was a wall 1 cubit high, and the alcoves were 6 cubits square. Then he measured the gateway from the top of the rear wall of one alcove to the top of the opposite one. The distance was 25 cubits from one parapet opening to the opposite one. He measured along the faces of the projecting walls all around the inside of the gateway 60 cubits. The measurement was up to the portico facing the courtyard. The distance from the entrance of the gateway to the far end of the portico was 50 cubits. The alcoves from the projecting walls inside the gateway were surmounted by the narrow parapet openings, and all around was the portico. The openings all around faced inward. The faces of the projecting walls were decorated with palm trees. Now look, I know this is hard to vision, okay? But I want you to listen as best as you can, because this is difficult, and there's like 8 chapters of this. Okay, and you might not understand, and let that be okay, because this vision is not on the world. It's not in the earth. And when you get to heaven, you'll say, oh, that's what, I get it now. So sometimes, listen, sometimes you have information in your head that doesn't make any sense. Imagine being a prophet. Okay, imagine God telling you to prophesy something and you die without ever seeing it happen. But when you get to heaven and you understand the whole plan and what God had working, you say, oh, I get it. So look, this is important. Okay, this temple, this outer court and the north gate and the south gate and all these things we're reading might not make great sense to you now, but they will. Okay, I promise you they will when we get to heaven. Then he brought me into the outer court where I saw some rooms and pavement that had been constructed all around the court. There were 30 rooms along the pavement. It abutted the sides of the gateways and was as wide as they were long. This was the lower pavement. Then he measured the distance from the inside of the lower gateway to the outside of the inner court. It was 100 cubits on the east side, as well as on the south, as well as on the north. So, and another thing I wanted to remind you that a cubit is 1.5 feet. So a foot is from here to here, and 1.5 feet is from here to here. So this is a cubit. So 6 cubits, if you think 6 cubits times 1.5 feet, would be 9 feet tall. So these walls that we're talking about are 9 feet tall. And when there's a cutout in the wall for the guards to stand, it's 1 cubit deep, 1 cubit deep, and then 6 cubits long. So it's 10 feet, and it's just a little cove for the guards to stand in. That's kind of what we're getting at. And while I don't understand all this stuff I'm reading, but but now listen, I do understand a lot of it because I have a lot of building. I was a builder. I know how this works. So where I can kind of envision something, you might not, and it's okay. Okay, don't get bogged down in these details either. They don't all mean something. This isn't a parable. This is a vision. Okay, and we're just trying to communicate this vision as best as possible. Verse 20. Then he measured the length and the width from the north gate, leading into the outer court. The alcoves, 3 on each side, its projecting walls, and its portico had the same measurements as those in the first gateway. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its openings, its porch, and its palm tree decorations had the same measurements as those of the gate facing east. 7 steps led up to it. With its portico opposite them, there was a gate in the inner court, facing the north gate, just as there was on the east. The measurement from one gate to the opposite one was 100 cubits. That's like half a football field, 150 feet, something like that. Verse 24. Then he led me to the south side, and I saw the south gate. He measured its jambs and its portico, and they had the same measurements as the others. The gateway and its portico had narrow openings all around, like the openings of the others. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. 7 steps led up to it, with its portico opposite them. It had palm tree decorations on the faces of the projecting walls on each side. The inner court also had a gate facing south, and he measured from its gate to the outer gate on the south side. It was 100 cubits. Verse 28. Then he brought me to the inner court through the south gate, and he measured the south gate, and it had the same measurements as the others. Its alcoves, its projecting walls, and its portico had the same measurements as the others. The gateway and its portico had openings all around it. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. The porticos of the gateways around the inner court were 25 cubits wide and 5 cubits deep. Its portico was faced on the outer court. Palm trees decorated its jambs, and 8 steps led up to it. Then he brought me to the inner court on the east side, and he measured the gateway. It had the same measurements as the others. Its alcoves, its projecting walls, and its portico had the same measurements as the others. The gateway and its portico had openings all around. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its portico faced the outer court. Palm trees decorated the jambs on either side, and 8 steps led up to it. Verse 35. Then he brought me to the north gate and measured it. It had the same measurements as the others, as it did the alcoves, its projecting walls, and its portico. It had openings all around. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its portico faced the outer wall. Palm trees decorated the jambs on either side, and 8 steps led up to it. Verse 38. A room with a doorway was by the portico in each of the inner gateways, where the burnt offerings were washed. In the portico of the gateway there were 2 tables on each side, on which the burnt offerings, sin offerings, and guilt offerings were slaughtered. By the outside of the portico of the gateway, near the steps at the entrance of the north gateway, were 2 tables. On either side of the steps were 2 tables. So there were 4 tables on either side of the gateway, and 4 on the other. 8 tables in all, on which the sacrifices were slaughtered. And there were also 4 tables of dressed stone for the burnt offerings, each a cubit and a half long, a cubit and a half wide, and a cubit high. On them were placed the utensils for slaughtering the burnt offerings and the other sacrifices. And the double-pronged hooks, each a handbreadth long, were attached to the wall around. The tables were there for the flesh of the offerings. The tables were for the flesh of the offerings. Verse 44. Outside the inner gate, within the inner court, were 2 rooms, one at either side of the north gate, facing south, and another at the side of the south gate, facing north. He said to me, "The room facing south is for the priests who guard the temple. The room facing north is for the priests who guard the altar. These are the sons of Zadok, who are the only Levites who may draw near to the Lord for ministering before him." Then he measured the court. It was square, 100 cubits long and 100 cubits wide, and the altar was in front of the temple. Verse 48. He brought me to the portico of the temple and measured the jambs of the portico. They were 5 cubits wide on either side. The width of the entrance was 14 cubits, and its projecting walls were 3 cubits wide on either side. The portico was 20 cubits wide and 12 cubits from front to back. It was reached by a flight of stairs, and there were pillars on each side of the jambs. Chapter 41. Then the man brought me to the main hall and measured the jambs. With the width of the jambs was 6 cubits on each side. The entrance was 10 cubits wide, and the projecting walls on each side of it were 5 cubits wide. He also measured the main hall, and it was 40 cubits long and 20 cubits wide. This is the new temple, by the way. Then he went into the inner sanctuary and measured the jambs of the entrance. It was 2 cubits wide, and the entrance was 6 cubits wide, and the projecting walls on each side of it were 7 cubits wide. And he measured the length of the inner sanctuary. It was 20 cubits, and its width was 20 cubits across. The end of the main hall, he said to me, "This is the most holy place." Verse 5. Then he measured the wall of the temple, and it was 6 cubits thick, and each side room around the temple was 4 cubits wide. The side rooms were on 3 levels, one above another, 30 on each level. There were ledges all around the wall of the temple to serve as supports for their side rooms, and so that the supports were not inserted into the wall of the temple. The side rooms all around the temple were wider at each successive level. The structure surrounding the temple was built in ascending stages, so that the rooms widened as one went upward. A stairway went up from the lowest floor to the top floor, through the middle floor. As I saw, the temple had a raised base all around it, forming the foundation of the side rooms. It was the length of the rod, 6 cubits. The outer wall of the side rooms was 5 cubits thick. The opening area between the side rooms of the temple and the priests' rooms was 20 cubits wide. And all around the temple there were 9 entrances to the side rooms for the open area, one on the north and another on the south, and the base adjoining the open area was 5 cubits all around. Verse 12. The building facing the temple courtyard on the west side was 70 cubits wide. The wall of the building was 5 cubits thick and all around. Its length was 90 cubits. Then he measured the temple. It was 100 cubits long, and the temple of the courtyard within and the building with its walls were also 100 cubits long. The width of the temple courtyard on the east, including the front of the temple, was 100 cubits. Then he measured the length of the building facing the courtyard at the rear of the temple, including its galleries on each side. It was 100 cubits. The main hall, the inner sanctuary, and the portico facing the court, as well as the thresholds and the narrow windows and galleries all around the 3 of them, everything beyond and including the threshold was covered with wood. The floor, the wall up to the windows, and the windows were covered in the space above the outside of the entrance to the inner sanctuary on the walls at regular intervals. All around the inner and outer sanctuary were carved cherubim and palm trees. Palm trees alternated with cherubim. Each cherubim had 2 faces, the face of a human being toward the palm tree on one side and the face of a lion toward the palm tree on the other. They were carved all around the whole temple, from the floor to the area above the entrance. Cherubim and palm trees were carved on the wall of the main hall. The main hall had a rectangular door frame. The one at the front of the most holy place was similar. There was a wooden altar 3 cubits high and 2 cubits square. Its corners, its base, and its sides were of wood. The man said to me, "This is the table that is before the Lord." Both the main hall and the most holy place had double doors. Each door had 2 leaves, 2 hinged leaves for each door. And on the doors of the main hall were carved cherubim and palm trees like those carved on the walls. And there was a wooden overhang in the front of the portico. On the side walls of the portico were narrow windows with palm trees carved on each side. These side rooms of the temple also had overhangs. Chapter 42. Then the man led me northward into the outer court and brought me to the rooms opposite the temple courtyard and opposite the outer wall on the north side. The building, whose door faced north, was 100 cubits long and 50 cubits wide, both in the section 20 cubits from the inner court, and in the section opposite the pavement of the outer court. Gallery facing gallery faced gallery at the three levels. In front of the rooms was an inner passageway, 10 cubits wide and 100 cubits long. Their doors were on the north. Now the upper rooms were narrower, for the galleries took more space from them than the rooms on the lower and middle floors of the building. The rooms on the top floor had no pillars, as the courts had, so they were smaller in floor space than those in the lower and middle floors. There was an outer wall parallel to the rooms and the outer courtyard. It extended in front of the rooms for 50 cubits, while the row of rooms on the side next to the outer court was 50 cubits long. The row on the side nearest the sanctuary was 100 cubits long. The lower rooms had an entrance on the east side, as one enters from the outer court. Verse 10. On the south side, along the length of the wall of the outer court, adjoining the temple courtyard, and the opposite of the outer wall, were rooms with a passageway in front of them. These were like the rooms on the north. They had the same length and width, with similar exits and dimensions. Similar to the doorways on the north, there were the doorways of the rooms on the south. There was a doorway at the beginning of the passageway that was parallel to the corresponding wall, extending eastward by which one enters the room. Verse 13. Then he said to me, the north and south rooms facing the temple courtyard are the priests' rooms, where the priests who approach the Lord will eat the most holy offerings. There he will put the most holy offerings, and the grain offerings, and the sin offerings, and the guilt offerings, for the place is holy. Once the priest enters the holy precincts, they are not to go into the outer court until they leave behind the garments in which they minister, for these are holy. They are to put on the other clothes before they go near the places that are for the people. Verse 15. When he had finished measuring what was inside the temple area, he led me out by the east gate and measured the area all around. He measured the east side with the measuring rod. It was 500 cubits. He measured the north side. It was 500 cubits by the measuring rod. He measured the south side. It was 500 cubits by the measuring rod. Then he turned to the west side and measured. It was 500 cubits by the measuring rod. So he measured the area on all four sides. It had a wall around it, 500 cubits long and 500 cubits wide, to separate the holy from the common. Alrighty, well that's it for today. I know that might have worn you out reading. It started to wear me out a little bit. But I was reminded, I used to build high schools. And y'all are, he's describing this temple, and it is huge, 500 cubits. That's like 750 feet. That is like 2.25 football fields. Now, that's huge. This is the temple that they built. This is bigger than most cities. Okay, what the size of this thing. Not the city, but like it's bigger than a city block. It's bigger than it's huge. It's absolutely huge. And the one thing that keeps coming to mind as I'm reading this is the attention to detail, number one. And I'm thinking about the tabernacle. We didn't get this much detail for the temple, for Solomon's temple, or in 2 Chronicles when we get the details of Solomon's temple that he gave to David. Okay, the plans that David had for the temple. those were more detailed than some things. But the tabernacle is, what I was thinking while we were reading this is how the tabernacle is the closest attention to detail that we had back in Exodus. Remember when Moses went up the mountain, God gave him all these instructions. And then when he came down the mountain the second time, not the first time, he he went through those details again as they built it. So he told them all the details, and then they built all the details, and that was kind of what we were just going through. There are a few more chapters of this reading in Ezekiel, but what he is describing is paradise, is heaven, is the heavenly temple. And I think the details go to tell us, that this is a real thing. This is a real place that really exists. Maybe not on earth, but it does exist. It's a place that was actually tangible and touchable. And he walked around this place with this person. And as they were going through and measuring everything, I was thinking about, when I was the assistant superintendent building high schools. And it was left up to me to do the punch lists on these high schools. Okay, and I would have to go through with the engineer or an inspector. And we'd have to do this several times, but they go through and you measure stuff and they look at stuff. Is that right? Is this good? Y'all see my new ceiling tiles in here. I kind of, so I was the one that was going through the job before this and telling people what they needed to fix before I could bring the inspector in. So you walk into a room and it's all painted pretty well, but you see some spots on the wall. Hey, this isn't good. The inspector's not going to like this. Okay, and that's kind of what I was thinking about, because I have been through, like I can imagine Ezekiel walking through this with this guy, like, man, when are we going to get done? This place is so big. I mean, the things that tell me that this isn't a place on earth is that in all of this reading, as we keep going through, you're not going to ever hear him describe a ceiling or a roof. The tabernacle, they described the roof, the layers of different types of things that were on the roof. Solomon's temple, they described a roof, but they don't describe a roof. So this is, it's not an earthly dwelling. This is something more. All right, guys. Well, I enjoyed it. If I'm not able to make videos, maybe it'll be about a week before and hopefully I can get back before day 69, and that'll be Matthew. I do want to do a review. What I might do is when we get finished with Ezekiel, make a review, and then do a review for the prophets. Guys, this is where we really need class. This is where we really need a class setting as we go through the prophets, the minor prophets, the 12, because it's difficult to know where those books go in the Bible. And as we get to them, I will introduce them and kind of give you something to go on. And the Bible Project videos, those of course help a lot. Alrighty, well, God loves you. I love you too. Y'all pray for me as I'm on. I need traveling mercy for the next week or so. I'm really just me and Isabel are gonna go for a ride and take Mama. So, and that's gonna be fun. But pray for me, and I'm not worried about it at all. We're gonna have a great time. And I'll keep praying for you. Love you. I mean it. God bless you. Amen.